Hi guys, welcome back to Mrs. Senasak's classroom. I'm here to talk to you today about Russian poetry, the common tones, moods, and themes that you will find in Russian poetry, and what you're about to learn actually is going to surprise you. Welcome back. So, what we see in the US on standardized tests, on our state tests, especially in the high school range, are specific poems that some random person is going to choose for you to read. Now, if you get a Russian poem on one of these state tests, they usually are going to give you one that has the stereotypical tone and mood that are either, tragic, there's a darkness, there's a sadness, there's a despair, there's a longing. The author could be longing, which would mean the tone is like this longing tone for something more. And the mood's gonna feel a little bit more like, I just feel total sadness. I'm just trapped in this sorrow as the reader, because that's the emotional atmosphere that the author has given us through the word choice. The most common theme that you are going to find on a state test is the theme of humanity is losing over time its sense of loving one another, its kindness for each other and their fellow human, as well as a slow decay and loss of chivalry. And chivalry is essentially our politeness and manners when we are thinking about the other person. The reason this happens is we have a cultural bias due to our involvement in the world wars, especially World War II, and Russia's involvement in those wars, and our political governments have not seen eye to eye because one side is a communist social mentality, the other a democracy and capitalism. And so there hasn't been a positive connotation with our governments and seeing eye to eye. The people, however, are people just like you and me. And so they have great loves. They see beauty in the world, and they have these feelings and emotions and stories to tell through their poetry. And the other reason that this happens is because they do have a lot of tragic poetry, because there have been revolutions and wars that they've gone through, because they've lost someone or something and needed to express themselves. And they really related to the absurdist genre and the absurdism movement. So absurdism is the notion that life is meaningless and that there is no point to it all. We go to work, we live, we die, that's it. There's no greater ideal out there. However, there's so much poetry out there that actually is heavily influenced by the romantic genre and romanticism, and also fables. For instance, Sergei Yesenin, I apologize for not saying the last name perfectly. He wrote The Birch Tree, and if you have not read it, I highly recommend that you read it now, because it was because of that poem that actually created a cultural shift towards making the birch tree a national treasure and a national symbol of Russia. So romanticism focuses on the imagination, nature, and beauty, and exploring that and celebrating that. Mikhail Lermontov was known for writing romantic pieces, and so those tones are usually not so dark. There's a lot to be celebrated. So if you get a romantic piece of literature from Russia, you're going to see more tones of appreciation, and you're going to have the mood sense of either a love or an enlightenment or your own appreciation. Look for differences in those things and look for their word choice throughout the poem. I have friends that grew up in Russia. They actually had to memorize poetry from many different artists and recite them in school. So we don't do that a lot here in the US. Usually that's like your English teacher saying, hey, for extra credit, memorize one of these poems and recite it to the class for extra credit. So they actually have their own favorite poems and favorite artists in Russian poetry because they have a deeper understanding than we do of our own poetry. So let's take a deeper look at Russian poetry. We're going to look at 3 specific poems. One that's heavily based in the absurdism genre. We're going to look at one that is focused on romanticism, and one that is a fable. The first poem we're going to look at is Alexander Blok's Night Street Lamp Drugstore. This is a perfect example of an absurdist poem. Night, street, lamp, drugstore, a dull and meaningless light. Go on and live another quarter century. Nothing will change. There's no way out. You'll die, then start from the beginning. It will repeat just like before. Night, icy ripples on a canal, drugstore, street, lamp. We say that this is an absurdist genre of literature because there is no meaning to life. It's pointless. It just starts over. It just repeats. And you get that repetition really hitting home in the monotony of life with the Night Street Lamp Drugstore being repeated at the beginning and end. The Birch Tree by Sergei Yesenin. This poem is an example of romantic literature. We'll see why in just a moment. Does it appreciate nature, beauty, imagination, or all of the above? Think about that as we read. Under my window, tucked in the snow, white birch retired, clad in silver glow. On the fluffy branches, snowy trimmed with silver tinge, melted around catkins, forming white fringe like golden fires. Snowflakes blazed while birch stood still, asleep or amazed. Meanwhile, lazily strolling around, dawn threw more silver on the twigs and ground. So the celebration of this beautiful birch tree in the winter is definitely celebrating nature and beauty. So that's what makes it a romantic genre piece. The tone here is just so fascinated. There's a fascination with the beauty of everything, and I think that the mood here is love. The emotional atmosphere is just infused with this adoration and love. So that would be our mood. The theme here is that there is beauty in the simplest things, even a birch tree. The next poem is an example of a Russian fable. It's Ivan Krylov's The Dragonfly and the Ant. In the summer's gaily singing, of the future isn't thinking, but the winter's nearby, field was green, it's now reddish, happy days already vanished. It happens no more that a leaf gives roof and store, all is gone. In cold winters, want and hunger wait afore, dragonfly sings no more. Who would like to sing yet more if the hungry belly hinders? She's crawling in dismay to the ants not far away. Dear crony, don't leave me. I'll be strong, you may believe me. But to manage winter storms, give me food, a bit of warmth. Oh my dear, it's very queer. Did you work in summer here? So ant his answer forms. But in summer I was busy, in the pleasant grass we'd had, many plays and songs ahead, very often I was dizzy. Ah, you mean I made a hint. All the summer I was singing. You were singing, well done dealing. Now dance a little bit. So what makes this a fable is that we have characters that are animals. So the main characters are the ant and dragonfly, and that's important because those are the things that make it a fable. Now, which genre would you say that it's in? Absurdist or romantic? I would argue both. There is a appreciation of nature, the appreciation of the seasons, the death and the rebirth of life in summer and winter. And then you've got this dark undertones because the dragonfly sings no more. And then we talk about a hungry belly, crawling in dismay. So that creates a little bit more of a darker tone and mood than the rest of the poem, where in the beginning the summer is gaily singing, so there's lots of happiness. The future, they're not thinking about it. There isn't a care in the world. Winter's nearby. So winter usually symbolizes death, and summer represents rebirth and growing, as well as spring. So here we see that very clearly, and it is pretty easy to see from beginning to end when you analyze this poem that there's a theme of death and rebirth. There's this idea that we don't think a lot about our future, and things just kind of happen. There's kind of like this circle of life, and we're happy in the summer and we're sad during the winter months. What do you think about this poem? Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe now. You see it? Subscribe. Thank you guys. Comment below if there's anything else that you want to learn about Russian poetry, Russian literature, anything to do with world literature. I'm looking for specific things that you need lessons on. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, guys.